Hello, everyone. It's just another day in the life of a military wife. And oh my goodness, did a lot happen last week that is going to mean it's just, yeah. There was a huge announcement last week about Army policy in regarding pregnancy, childbirth, miscarriage, the whole shebang. Army declaration dropped, and it is. Yeah, we're gonna talk about it. It's gonna significantly impact military culture and procedure, as well as a lot of military families, particularly female soldiers in general. So we're gonna go and talk about all that and some other stuff. Yeah, and just see how it's going to affect everyone. I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you are listening to Life of a Military Wife. Okay, so let's just break this all down. Army Directive 2022-06 dropped last week. And I, in a previous episode, was talking to y'all about how they were in the process of evaluating maternity procedures and policies and protocol and whatnot. Trying to be more supportive of female soldiers. And I said that was great that they had started a conversation. I literally had no idea they were going to go. Maybe this conversation has been going on longer than I realized. It probably has. But it's just kind of quick to have been, hey, we're having this conversation and boom, now we have a policy. So, because, I mean, come on, it's the military. That rarely happens. They never get to writing new policy that quickly. But okay, so I want to at least cover and highlight a few major portions of this. And honestly, go read it. Go read it. It is not too long, and it's got a lot of detail to it. I'm going to hit highlights. One of the major highlights that everyone has been reporting on, and so you may have already heard this, but to ensure that there is at least one parent in the home with a child, there will be a deferment or excused absenciness, basically a deferment given for 365 days after the birth of the child, and they will be. The exemption or deferment includes deployment, mobilization, field training, combat training center programs, collective training events, pre-mobilization training, unit training, assemblies, temporary duty stations, and this applies to adoption, this applies to miscarriage, this applies to a lot of different stuff. Now there are some different things, like it applies to adoption, but then it's saying that it does not apply in cases of a step parent or a sibling adoption. But it applies to surrogate parents. It is complicated. It is complicated, people. But basically, if you have a kid, you now get a year where they cannot send you away from your baby if you're a female soldier. This is significant because, like I said in the past, I know specifically of a female airman. Now, this would not have applied to her because, again, Air Force versus Army. If she had been in the Army, though, and this had been in effect, it would not have been possible. They tried to basically, as soon as she got off of maternity leave after 3 months, they were trying to send her to a new duty station without her baby or her husband. That would not have been possible. You can volunteer for those things during that year period, but you cannot be required to do it. And it goes on to explain that further on, how these things are part of it. Also, if you are pregnant, you've got a profile. I'm not sure if everyone knows that, but a pregnancy profile is a thing. A profile is when you are considered for a medical reason incapable of doing certain physical activities that are normally expected of a service member. So profiles happen for lots of different reasons. For those who are not in the military, if you sprain your ankle, twist a wrist, whatnot, you can get a temporary profile for those sorts of injuries. If you have a more long-term thing, you can also get a profile, and you get profiles for pregnancy, because there are certain things you should not be doing when you are pregnant. So there is pregnancy PT and all that sort of stuff. But basically what they're saying is also another huge factor in this is that if you have a profile for your pregnancy, it should not keep you out of schools or training. So basic leadership course, captain career course, warrant officer basic course, a lot of these different things, that profile will not be exclusionary to you being able to get in. So normally if you have a profile like this, specifically if you were pregnant, those sorts of schools are a no-go. They don't want people who can't do, because part of a lot of those courses, basic leadership course, all of those things, there is physical components to it, and they want people who can do the entire thing, not individuals, service members who will have to be, made allowances for. However, pregnancy is now an exception to that previous policy. And again, if, for example, you are pregnant and you are in one of these courses and you have a miscarriage, they are expected to give you convalescent leave and then allow you to come back without any penalties or anything like that. Also, if you get selected for one of these things and you turn it down because you're in your year window, you can't be penalized for it. So there's a lot of behind the scenes ness that goes on in the military. So for example, if you're slotted for one of these trainings and you are like, yeah, that doesn't work for me right now, the likelihood of you getting back into that training anytime soon is like nil. It's minimal. Like, here's a good example. My husband was picked for one of those trainings. It was a leadership training. He was supposed to be going to it. There was a family emergency. And quite literally, the choice that we had to make was, does he defer because of this family emergency, which they would have let him do? They would have let him defer. That's fine. But he would have never been put back on the list. The waiting list was a mile long, 1.5 miles, like 2 miles long. Like, the waiting lists for these courses are insane. And so if you do not do it when they say, hey, we want you, we've got room, the likelihood of you ever getting back to the top of the list in a reasonable time is really low. And if you need that course to be able to go to your next rank, to move on in your military career, that can set you back for years. And not only could it set you back for years, it can also set you back so much that you end up being pushed out of the military completely. Because if you don't reach certain milestones by certain points, like if you don't achieve certain ranks in a certain amount of time, then you get the bye-bye. You get the little wave bye-bye. You get let go. And so the fact that then now is an exemption for that there's not going to, that's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how all this stuff plays out. Again, it applies to fertility treatments also. So if you're going through fertility treatments, you will also get these deferments. The deferments can actually be transferred to, if you're dual military, to someone else, like to your spouse or partner. Yeah, there's a lot to it. Part of the main reason why they're wanting these deferments is for nursing moms. It is incredibly difficult to be a nursing mom and do these trainings, to be away. And anyway, ironically enough, the same time this all dropped, there was an open letter that was published by a major in the Army a female major in the Army, who both her and her husband were officers, and they were going to be getting out because of this sort of thing. And the article was in Mountain Tactical Institute. It was from them. In the initial part of it, she talks about the happiness formula that was previously discussed in another article by Rob Shaw. And that formula is doing work you love, plus living in a place you love, plus being near people you love equals happiness. And that if you can get 2 out of those 3, then you're doing good. And what she addresses is that if you really truly got most service members to be completely honest, majority of the time, they're not hitting 2 out of the 3 on that. They're hitting maybe 1 out of 3, because they're not always doing work they love. A lot of officers in particular, I've heard this issue with, and I've seen this issue with NCOs as well. You reach a certain point in your career where you're no longer doing the thing you love, your management. And a lot of people did not get into the military to be management. They want to do their job. They want to do the job that they got in the military to do. They don't want to micromanage people. And when you get into the management positions, if it's not your forte, it's really, really can cause a lot of anxiety and stress. That said, living in a place you love. You don't always love every duty station. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. So maybe that is your one. Maybe you'll get 2 out of 3 sometimes, but it's not a given. And then being near people you love, because you're away from your family, you're away from friends. If you have a hard time reestablishing connections and stuff, that can also be a situation where you're not with people you love, and you're not always going to love the people you work with. That is true in and out of the military. Like civilian, military, doesn't matter. You don't always like your coworkers. It's just a fact of life. But if you do, it always helps. So, but she was talking about how there really is this attitude of silent suffering that in the jobs that make them miserable, and living with Thoreau's life of quiet desperation in the military, that you feel like if you say it, if you say the quiet thing out loud, then you're letting down down your fellow soldiers, and that you're not being a team player. And that is hard, because a huge part of why people join the military is because they have that sense of duty and camaraderie, and so they don't want to let their battle buddy down. They don't want to let their fellow officers down. They want to be a team player, but it's hard when you're stuck in these situations where you feel like it's a lose-lose situation, and that can get really stressful. And also work-life balance, especially for female service members, is kind of a joke. Work-life balance in general in the military is kind of a joke. You really have to work hard to find balance in the military. And balance is going to be different. And I've talked about ways to work on that and everything. But this major, talks about having kids and taking care of a family as a female service member is incredibly difficult, and that the Army makes you feel inadequate and useless if you pursue, pregnancy and having a child and things like that. And I really, I've seen that. I've known quite a few female service members who felt like they didn't have the option to pursue motherhood because of the impact it would have on their careers, for how much it would hold them back, for the fact that it would let people down. And she references an individual she knew who was a captain who did have a child and was trying to nurse and was on a field training and was trying to pump while out in the field and keep it cold and then get it shipped back to the headquarters so that her family could pick it up to feed the baby, and just the logistical nightmare it was for that poor captain who was trying to just be everything for everyone, and just how difficult it was making. And that, just watching someone go through that is enough to turn a lot of female service members off, to be like, deuces, that is not worth it. I'm not doing that. I'll just wait. And then when you do finally decide that, okay, maybe this isn't for me right now. Maybe I do want to go pursue motherhood. Maybe I want to pursue other options. There is a stigma to getting out, as if you're a quitter, like you're letting people down, you're written off, you're ostracized. And I have seen this. Individuals who come to the conclusion that military service is no longer the best fit for their family, and they've done their service and it's time for them to move on, people immediately try to talk you out of it. They try to talk you out of it. They try to guilt trip you, whatever. It just happens. And, that is unfortunate, because if these people are starting to realize that this isn't where they need to be anymore, then it's time to let them move on without guilt, because that is going to only make military life better in general. You don't want people who are only there because they feel like they have to be. You want people serving. We want people serving our country because it's genuinely what they want to do, and it's genuinely where they want to be, because that is going to make us a stronger, more effective military. And that is one reason why this whole directive from the Army is going to make things a little complicated, because their intentions are great. The reasoning behind this, I can totally understand. But this directive is being inserted into military culture. And you can say, don't hold it against the female soldier all you want, but that is still something that can happen. Leadership can still make those choices. They can still whatever about that. Also, it's going to mean that, this is going to increase the instances of individuals who are not deployment or readiness capable. So it'll be wait and see to see how that affects readiness, how that affects all of these sorts of things, because they do impact each other. At this point in time, I don't feel like there is enough female service members in the Army who are going to utilize this directive that it will drastically impact readiness. That's my personal take, but I am not an expert on readiness. However, it might affect morale or perspective or the way people view female soldiers. If they see it as a readiness liability, I wonder how leadership is going to treat them. So it's going to be a wait and see sort of thing. Again, I am not against any of this stuff. I think that a lot of these things are well meant, well intentioned. It should really help for nursing moms. It seems reasonable. It seems like they were trying to be reasonable, rational, and level-headed about these accommodations. The thing that we're just going to have to watch and wait and figure out is how it affects things down the road. Because in any organization, when you have policy changes, there are the foreseen consequences and the unforeseen consequences of those. And we can't predict what all the ramifications will be. So, in a lot of ways, I think this is a good thing. I think this is an opportunity for individuals who genuinely love to be in the military, to find a way, especially dual service military spouses, to stay in and continue to serve their country while still pursuing a family. So there's a lot of other factors in this. Like I said before, it covers uniforms, it covers PTs, it covers schools, it covers the reserve and guard and how it'll apply to them. So if you are in the military and this applies to you and your family, I really do strongly suggest you actually read it for yourself and not just someone's review on it. Like I said, I've read it several times and I catch new things every time. So it is definitely something that's worth going over because of how it could affect you. Or if you're in a leadership position, this is just a good one to read. It's a good one to read in general. So that said, there is a lot coming up in the next little bit. I'm continuing to work on website. I am opening up the website to increase the public speaking opportunities that I am pursuing. And also, we now have a Twitter. There is a Twitter account for Life of a Military Wife. It is Sam Wolf at Sam Wolf 24/7 on Twitter. So you can catch me on Twitter now. That is a new development. I have never really done Twitter before. I'm not much of a Twitter person. So we'll see how Twitter goes and Twitter treats me. But yeah, you can catch me on there. I will be posting articles and information, things that I think are helpful to military community in general on there. So that said, I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you have been listening to Life of a Military Wife.